episode 111 of the Inside the Mind podcast. And I'm super pumped to be joined by Brad Hall, who's bobsledder, part of Team GB, Team Great Britain. And man, I'm super pumped for this, and especially thinking about kind of the mental side of sports and life and just dealing with challenges and how to overcome adversity. Because like I was mentioning a bit off camera, as I was doing my homework and research for this episode, I already knew kind of a little bit of the situation about GB bobsled back in 2019, and now COVID happening. Like, it's kind of back to back, just how many challenges can be thrown at one team. But then when I went to the nitty gritty of it, I was like blown away just how extensive kind of everything went. So maybe, if it's okay, a good place we can start is 2019 and kind of the months leading up to, I guess it was UK Sport and their decision to pull funding from the bobsled.
Yeah, that's right. So after the 2018 Olympics, they wanted us to win a medal. We didn't manage that, so they gave us a year of transitional funding. So the UK Sport is our main source of funding. So they gave us 1 year transitional just to get through to the next World Champs, to kind of like stand on our own 2 feet after that. Or if we win a medal at the World Champs, that they'll consider funding us for the next years up until the Beijing Games. So yeah, but then after the World Champs in Whistler, yeah, that's when they pulled the rug from underneath us.
When you say like transitional funding, was there any sort of like criteria or mark you had to reach in order to have that funding continue on, or was it kind of left in the dark a bit?
Yeah, well, the main aims was always for us to win a medal at Olympic Games or a World Championship. So that's the only thing that matters to them as a funding body. So your World Cup races, they don't really matter. It's the event at the end of the year that counts, and they wanted us to win a medal again. But yeah, it was a tough year, that one, because we didn't have the equipment. That's why we weren't successful in South Korea as well. We didn't win a medal there, or we were nowhere close, just because our equipment was nowhere near as good as anyone else's. So we didn't stand a chance. So before the World Champs in Whistler, we started to do our own crowdfunding to try and raise money to rent our own 2-man sled. And we done that. And the results leading up to the World Champs just kept getting better and better and better, like PB like 3 or 4 times in a row. And then at the World Champs, was in a completely new sled again, and we finished 4th. So we thought, considering all the circumstances that we'd gone through, to get 4th was an amazing achievement. No one that I know of has achieved that with a rented sled. So, but it still wasn't enough, unfortunately. So, yeah,
even just the whole notion of just renting equipment as kind of a high level athlete is so weird, I guess. Because I think about, like, you don't see NHL players renting skates. You don't see like soccer players renting cleats. Like, they buy them. They're funded, right? I'm intrigued.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm intrigued what your mindset was kind of in that moment. You're there with your bobsled, rented, probably not the highest quality, and you look around, all of these teams and countries have their highest quality. I'm just intrigued what your mental process is as you're observing these things.
Yeah, so it's a difficult thing. Like when you get into a sled, you get used to it, and the more time you spend in it, the finer tuning things that you can do to get used to it, it just gets easier. But we didn't have that, and I knew that. Well, that was our only opportunity. That's our only shot, and we had to make the most of it. And that's what we've always done, really. And we haven't really looked around us and focused on anyone else. We just we knew that we had a fast start. I knew that I can drive a sled. I just needed to learn how to drive this one, and we could be in with a shot. And the track at Whistler is a tough track for most people to drive, but it's actually my favourite track. So it's stood to a big advantage, especially the European teams like the Germans. They all know how to drive their home tracks on European tracks, but when you come to North America, it levels the playing field out a little bit. So we knew that we had a good shot, and we just needed to try and keep it together as best we can. And I thought that even if I made loads of mistakes in a new sled, it will still be better than me having perfect runs in my old one.
Right. So, exactly. Yeah. And as you're describing that, and kind of the whole notion of, having poorer equipment, maybe not having the same, privileges or whatever it may be as other teams, it kind of made me think about just, hard work just kind of trumps everything. And I think it's true in life in general. Like, somebody can have all the bells and whistles, they can be set up for as much success, but if they don't put in the hard work, they're not going to get the results. On the flip side, even if you don't have all the bells and whistles and you have the poorest equipment, if you put in the hard work, I think a lot of people will be surprised just the potential they can reach, even though they have all these perceived limitations around them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the way that I was seeing it at the time is that, well, the years leading up to it was that we didn't have the equipment at that time, but there's a lot of things that I could still focus on that were still in my control. So I could still be the best pusher that I could be and learn about the equipment that we did have and learn how to maximize that as much as possible and learn how to drive a sled as well as I can, so that when the only little thing that changed was the equipment, we just took a massive step up. And that's, so we were ready for that change when it happened, instead of kind of like saying, oh, this isn't good enough, we're never going to win anything, or just quite a defeatist mentality. And then when you get the sled, you still got to work on all these things. It's like, no, we've try and work on everything that we can. And when this little piece then comes into the puzzle, then everything will be as we wanted. And that's the way it happened.
Yeah. And it even made me think there too about just how valuable it was potentially, even though at that point in time, it might've been hard to realize this, but when you train with substandard equipment, or you train like with so much adversity, then when you get like the new equipment in your case, it just makes it that much easier to run it. And kind of the real life example I'm thinking about is boxing. Cause I used to do boxing for a bit. And when I would shadow box, I would hold like, 5, 7.5 or 10-pound dumbbells, and I'd shadow box with that, and it felt so hard. I felt so slow, felt so sluggish. But once I put on just the actual mitts, because they're so much lighter, it felt that much easier to punch, and I felt that much better at boxing. And that's kind of a little bit of the analogy that I'm drawing there.
No, that makes completely sense. Yeah, it's you kind of train with a disadvantage, and then when it's lifted, you just have this sense that even if you do make some small mistakes, it's still going to be better than you having those weights strapped to your fists.
Exactly. And the second piece about that I guess story that I wanted to dive a bit deeper into is I think you mentioned it was before the 2019 season, where they had kind of told you it was a transitional funding. And from my perspective, it kind of sounds a little bit like an ultimatum. Like, hey, you either perform well and you get the money, or you don't perform well, you don't get the money. And did it ever seem like an ultimatum to you? Because ultimatums, I think, to a lot of people can be quite scary and quite anxiety provoking.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we knew what was at stake. We needed to win a medal. We're no stranger to pressure or anything like that, because we've been under a ton before, and it's just like, we've got to perform in this day or do this. But the sort of mentality I was going into that year, I wasn't really that nervous or anxious of it, because I just thought, I'm just going to do everything to the best of my ability, and then whatever happens. It's like, if you think about all this negative stuff, it's only going to hold you back rather than help you. So there's no point of letting it have any control over you, except use that in a positive way, and then try to motivate you, instead of thinking, if I don't do this, then this is going to happen. It's like, just do as best you can, and then whatever happens. If it's not good enough, then it's not good enough, and be happy with that. But just know that you've done your best, and that's all you can do.
I saw a post on social media not too long ago where it was titled something kind of cheesy, I guess, but it said like, your brain doesn't understand the word don't. And the take-home message I got from it is, when you tell yourself, don't do this, don't do that, like avoid these things, your brain computes it as like to do it. Like, it ignores the don't part. And it's like somebody, I guess a really kind of basic example, a little bit more in line of kind of the field of work I do, is someone could be, addicted to junk food. And if they tell themselves, don't eat junk food, don't eat junk food, don't eat junk food, all they think about is junk food. It's better to think about, I think, like the replacement behaviors, or like you said, the positive affirmations, the positive thoughts. And like in your case, you're not telling yourself, don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up. You're telling yourself like the positive things, right?
Yeah. Well, I tend to try and think of nothing. Like, obviously you go through the stages of learning, and when you first start learning of things, you need to think about it quite a lot, because it's all quite new. But then when you get to a higher standard where everything gets a bit more autonomous, so your body knows what it needs to do, so you just kind of need to let it react and do it. So I remember at university reading a book called I think it was In the Game of Lawn Tennis, and it was about
I have that book.
Yeah. Is that the title of the book? Yeah. It's a great thing, and that's stuck with me since I was at uni in psychology. And it's just how the best performers in the world, when they have these amazing performances, it's kind of like an out of body experience, is that they don't have much recollection of things happening because their body just goes into autopilot and it just happens. Your body can react so much faster on its own rather than you thinking about what to do. It's like if you burn yourself when you're cooking and then you try and catch something, your body does it so much faster than you thinking, all right, I need to get my hand and put it there to catch this or something else. It's just trying to let all your training just come out and just do what it needs to do, and it knows it can do.
Exactly. That Inner Game of Tennis book is probably one of the favorite books that I've ever read, especially as a tennis player currently. And one of the, like, kind of as you're mentioning there, the biggest takeaway I took from it, I think they kind of termed it as like you have kind of two sides to your brain, side one and side two. And like side one is like your consciousness and side two is your subconsciousness. And like during training, you want side one to be firing because that's where the learning happens. That's where that memory kind of ingraining happens about the techniques and strategies and movements and whatever. But once it's competition times, you want to turn that brain off and turn on brain.
You just want to completely forget about everything. And just whatever sticks, it sticks, and whatever it doesn't, it doesn't. That's like push technique. You can push pretty in training, but as soon as it comes to a competition, if it looks horrible, it just going at it 100%. And if it looks horrible, it's still going to be faster than you trying to control it and making it look pretty. It's like some of the fastest pushers in the world just don't push. They don't look like they push well, right? But they just put that effort in, and then they can just bring out more than what they can if they just try and control everything.
Exactly. And I think too, some people might get caught up in kind of what feeds into this loop about thinking too much before competition or before anything. It could be before a presentation, could be before a job interview. Is I think they try and maybe perhaps cram everything to like the last second. So my kind of analogy to this is studying for a test or studying for an exam. I always felt it was silly for people to cram it in between, like right before the exam, because it's like, how much are you really going to learn in these 5 minutes before the exam? Like probably nothing. Like just shut your brain off and let all the practice or studying you've done take over. And I attribute that a lot to sports. Before a match, or in your case, before a run, 5 minutes before a run, how much more are you really going to learn about pushing a bobsled in that 5 minutes? I think it just feeds into that anxiety, negative feedback loop, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, the more you think about something, the more it kind of consumes you, doesn't it? It's that you just need to try and relax as much as you can. And most of the time, the things that you think about and worry about, I don't know, they're sometimes. Oh, sorry. This is. Yeah. Sometimes the things that you think about, they often don't even happen, and then the things that they do happen you can deal with anyway, so what's the point in worrying? It's like there's only a very small percentage of things that happen and you can't deal with, so what's the point of worrying about everything if there's such a small amount of things that actually happen and you can't control?
The brain is so tricky in that way that it seems that for so many people the brain automatically goes to worst case scenario. It's probably due to some sort of evolutionary biology in our past and living in the wild and whatnot, that it was advantageous to go right to the worst case scenario and, stay alive in that situation. But perhaps, it's obviously not the most ideal in 2021. But I always just, as people that kind of come to me or younger athletes that I coach or consult with, and they think the same thing too. I see a lot of younger kids struggle with this. They think of the worst case scenario right away. I let them know and this was actually a tip that I learned from another podcast. I think it was episode 103 with Faye Gulini. She's a professional skier as part of the US team, but she had talked about how when something bad happens to her, she thinks, is this the worst thing that happened to me today? And if it is, it's probably not a bad day overall. Like say you mess up your training. If you mess up something in your training and that's the worst thing that happened to you in your day, it's probably not a bad day overall compared to like the amount of people in the world that deal with tragedies and death and whatever it may be, right? And that's something that I have really kind of taken under my wing and started using is, I could be walking, I could stub my toe, I could be late for work, whatever, I get stuck in traffic. And it's like in the moment, it feels like the worst day ever. And then I take a step back and I think, okay, if this is the worst day ever, I probably have a pretty good life compared to the worst days that everybody else in the world kind of has.
Yeah, it's about putting it into perspective, isn't it? It's yeah, sometimes it's difficult to kind of like take yourself away from that. But most of the time, you go to sleep, wake up in the morning, and then you feel about it completely different. So what's the point of letting it have that control over you? But like what you're saying, it's about people worrying about making mistakes and things like that. I think that kind of feeds into a lot of people just trying to be perfect all the time. And obviously, well, things in social media and stuff like that don't help because everyone just says that everything's perfect and amazing all the time, when in reality it's not. And like making mistakes and things going wrong is all a part of the learning process, and it's about trying to learn from them, and so that you make less mistakes in the future, or you kind of then can evaluate what you've done or what's happened or why it's happened, and then make a plan for the future. It's just, but trying not to have any at all is a bad way to go. And especially if you're a young athlete, you're gonna make a ton of mistakes all the time. Like even where I am, and a lot of international athletes, they still make a lot of mistakes. But yeah, at the start, it's just going to come at you all the time. So you need to get used to it for the long run.
Exactly. There's two things there I wanted to unpack. But the first one is how you ended off there about, even the highest of highest athletes make mistakes. Like nobody is 100% perfect, right? And kind of, exactly. I guess to compare it to the NFL, I guess, because it's probably the most recognizable sport for North American listeners, is you can have a youth football player and they want to be perfect as a quarterback. When you think about Tom Brady, you think about Aaron Rodgers, like they're obviously not perfect. And it's great to like aim for perfection, but it's also like if Tom Brady isn't perfect in his career, if he isn't perfect game by game, it's probably a bit unrealistic to think you're going to be perfect game by game. And that applies, I think, to sports, life, whatever it may be. Some people can look at their boss as like the perfect boss, like they don't ever mess up or whatever. It's obviously not the case. It's such a weird perspective people take where right in front of them, people like high-level athletes are making mistakes day by day, but they still feel like they need to be perfect to reach that level.
Yeah, well, what you're saying about trying not to make any mistakes and being perfectionism is something that's not attainable at the end of the day. Like being perfect you can't do it. So what's the point of aiming for it? Because then you're gonna focus on every little mistake you made instead of thinking about not making mistakes, just trying to make smaller mistakes. Like the difference between a beginner athlete and a high level athlete is that a high level athlete still makes mistakes, but they'll be smaller. Like the beginner athletes won't necessarily notice when a professional athlete has made a mistake because it's so small, but the high level athlete knows it's made a mistake and thinks it's glaringly obvious, but a lot of other people are blind to that mistake because they don't have that experience. They know. So they are still making mistakes. It's just on a different level.
Right. No, I love the way you put that. And the second thing that I wanted to dive into was I was intrigued when you started off in the sport of bobsled, or perhaps when you get to like the highest and highest of competitions like the Olympics. Did you ever feel yourself struggling with that, like struggling to be perfect and struggling with not being perfect afterwards?
Yeah, well, this kind of loops back to the sled situation. So yeah, because I was always in subpar equipment a lot of the time, and every time when I didn't know when I had a good run, because a good run would mean that I'd be like 15th in the pack, which is obviously still nowhere near the top. So, and I was like, how can I get from 15th to the first? So I'd then try and make myself better and better and better and better. But then I found myself making more mistakes. So I didn't actually know when I was actually doing well and when it was a bad run, because I didn't get that feedback of like where it's put me on the leaderboard, because it was always like 15th if I thought it was good, but then down really far if I made any sort of mistake. So, but then I didn't know, how, like where it came from or why or how to improve, because I couldn't see how it then adjusted to the best in the world. But then as soon as I made that change into the new sleds, I knew exactly like what things worked and what didn't.
Right. So I guess there, like having the new sled gave you just another level of analysis. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. After 2019, I mean, not as if 2019 was challenging enough for you, COVID hits.
Yeah.
And COVID, I think we've all had our fair share of challenges with COVID. But I know that your challenges with COVID were kind of compounded with injuries amongst your team
Yeah.
as well. If you don't mind, for people that might be unfamiliar with the story, kind of walk them through the 2020 season and maybe some of the mental challenges that you guys as a team faced during that season.
Yeah, so obviously we lost our funding back in February of 2019. So the 2019-2020 season, that's the one before last, we were fully self-funded. So we had to raise all our money for our own season, buy our own equipment, and then go out into the world and face the best in the world. And we did really well that year. We came away with a silver medal, but it was obviously very stressful on me because it's I need to focus as an athlete, but then I've also got to wear all these other hats. I've got to be like sort of a performance director, a sponsorship manager, and a team manager and coach and everything like this. I've got to do everything all wrapped into one. So that's my first season doing that. And then last season, I still had to do all that, but I hired a coach to come and help us. And thank God I did, because I wouldn't have a chance to get through last year without him. Because, we had all the struggles with COVID, trying to get in and out of each country, 2 or 3 COVID tests a week with someone sticking a long swab up your nose. And then, we had a lot of injuries. So my ankles were injured for pretty much the whole seasons with Achilles bursitis. So I was always struggling to get through the season. We had to quarantine because one of our medics had a false positive test. So we had spent 2 or 3 weeks in quarantine. One guy had a bad hamstring tear. Another one had Achilles rupture. And then when it all came back to the world champs, we had the guy with the bad hamstring back, but he still wasn't really good enough. My groin started going bad, and another guy had to go home for personal reasons as well. So it was the worst luck I've ever seen of any team. And a lot of the other teams sympathized with us quite a lot.
Right. And again, so much to unpack there that I'm interested in. But we'll start off at the end there, as you kind of mentioned the false positive test with the medic. And I wanted to bring this up because I think of myself, if I were in a similar situation where somebody, in this case, someone was deemed positive, you have to quarantine 2 or 3 weeks, and then you find out later it was a false positive, I would be pretty pissed. And it would be pretty hard for me to get over that and to not dwell on that. I'm intrigued from your perspective. Did you ever have those feelings of like being pissed off, like dwelling on it? And number 2, how did you eventually, if you had to, get over those feelings? Yeah.
So for myself, obviously I'm the pilot of the team, and we've got no management. So I'm effectively the leader of my guys, and I've kind of got to set a good example for them. So we knew that this season was always going to be tough. A lot of things were always going to change. So instead of thinking that this is the plan and that's the way it's going to go, I was living more on a day-to-day basis. I wasn't thinking too far ahead because I knew things could change in an instant with a positive test, and then we've got changed plans. But I know my guys, they weren't in the same mind frame as me, and they did get quite pissed off with a lot of things, being in quarantine and not going out. And it's like, well, if we can do this, we can do that. And like trying to find little ways around it. I was like, guys, we just can't do it. If we do something stupid now, then that's it for the rest of the season. Like, we've got to think about this and deal with it as best we can. This is the hand we're dealt, and we got to deal with it. And that's what we did week on week. And obviously a lot of things turned up. It wasn't just the positive test, but it's just about just getting back up, reevaluating, and trying to find the best way forward and making the most out of every situation we had.
As you're in all these roles, like you said, like not only are you part of the bobsled team, like you compete in bobsled, but you're like the manager, the fundraiser, the scheduler, all these admin tasks as well. How did you organize, or how did you manage your time? Because I mean, just from following your social media and being aware of your training schedule, it's quite extensive. And to compound all these admin tasks on it, perhaps, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but without some sort of system or organization, it could all get kind of muddled together and lost pretty quickly.
Yeah, definitely. So to begin with, in my first season, it was definitely very stressful. Like the last few years, I've had a lot of injuries, which just kind of affected me quite a lot. So it's been difficult to focus on my training and all this on top of it as well. So it has been a really hard situation. But Yeah, I'm not too sure if I dealt with it amazingly well with my first year. We still managed to do well. I don't really know how I've done it, but I've had a lot of support from my guys as well. So it's not just me. If I need any help or anything, I do go to my guys and they help pick up the slack. Or if I say I'm not having a good day or this, that, the others is not helping, they've always been there to help me. So I've definitely had a good support network to help me through these times as well. And now I've done it for a couple of years now, so hopefully now I'm able to stand on my own 2 feet a little bit more. Yeah. But without the help of all my guys, that wouldn't have been possible.
A true team effort. And I guess there it kind of like it makes me think about like the most important thing whenever you have a set of tasks in front of you is just to get them done. I think a lot of people, they, what is it called? I think the term is like paralysis from planning.
No, paralysis by analysis. That's the one.
Thank you. Clearly, I'm not good at quotes and stuff. Paralysis by analysis. I've been a victim of this a lot too, as you know.
Same.
I'll download 10 or 15 kind of to-do apps or calendar apps, whatever it is, and spend all this time planning out these systems and everything, where I could have spent all that time just actually doing the tasks. It's a weird line, I think, for people to balance on, because on one side you do need some system, some organization to get through life. On the other hand, you don't want to spend too much time on it and take away from actually doing the tasks. So the one, I guess, tip that I always give to people is just pick one thing and just try it out for like 1 week. Like take things 1 week at a time, and after 1 week, then make some sort of changes. So you're not making these daily or bi-daily or whatever it is changes that then interrupts the process or the flow.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was a lot of people, they think about everything as a whole, don't they? It's like they think they've got all these things to do, and it just gets too much, and they get overwhelmed with it because they've got so many things they need to do. But instead of just thinking about everything, just focus on one. Just get it started, get it done, and it doesn't matter how fast you move through it, as long as it's moving forward. Then you know you're making your way there. But the more you sit there and think about it, the less you're actually going to do, because you're sitting there doing nothing. So moving forward slowly is better than doing nothing at all.
It reminds me of a quote, and this quote I will try my best not to mess up, but it's from a podcast guest I had not long ago. His name was Kaylor Betts. He's like a mental wealth coach up here in Canada, and he said that the wrong decision on Monday is better than the right decision on Friday. And I think the point he was trying to get across is it's better to make that choice early on in the week. And then even if it is the wrong choice, at least you know it's the wrong choice. And when you make that wrong choice, you're one step closer to making that right choice, compared to kind of like you said, the paralysis by analysis from Monday to Friday and eventually making that choice on Friday. That quote has just really kind of stuck with me. It's better to make the wrong decision on Monday than the right decision on Friday. I think with the mindset of getting things done quickly and just trying things out and seeing what happens.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. It's better to make any decision, just do something rather than do nothing and then miss the boat at the end of the day, isn't it? It's like, you want to do something instead of just sitting there doing nothing and then just miss the whole thing. And by that point, it's too late. Whatever you do doesn't matter, because it's already finished.
And you can't get that time back. That's one thing that nobody can get back, is that time. So that just that whole piece just gives you a whole new perspective. But the third thing that I wanted to dive into about the 2020 season, or maybe the 3 out of 4 thing, because there's one other thing that you had mentioned in a previous interview, I think, or a social media post I wanted to dive into. But the third thing that I was interested in about your 2020 season was the fundraising piece. Because for 2 reasons. One, I just think not a lot of athletes have to go through that process to actually fundraise funds for themselves, especially professional athletes. When you think about players that play in pro sports leagues, that's kind of all already set up for them. And number 2, I've always viewed, and maybe you can shed some more light on this, fundraising as you're kind of putting yourself out there in a little bit of a vulnerable situation, I have to imagine, because here you are going out to the world, like asking for money. Like, I'm in need of money. Our team is in need of money. We need money. We need help. And asking for help for a lot of people, I think, is a really vulnerable situation for them. So I'm intrigued about the fundraising. Was there 1 or 2 things or anything that maybe caught you off guard about just how challenging that process was, that you hadn't expected would be that challenging?
Well, with a lot of it, or like you said, it's asking for help is sometimes the hardest thing, isn't it? So I'm very proud of myself that I try and do as much as I can myself, and I try and not feel like too much of a burden to other people or ask for too much. And it's kind of like let me learn that you can't do anything alone, and you've always got to ask for help, and it's not necessarily a sign of weakness to do that. But searching for sponsors is a really tough thing. Is actually, I find, is talking about yourself in a positive way. It's like us to get stuck together as bobsledders, we kind of downplay a lot of our achievements and the things that we go through and the things that we do. And actually talking about that sort of stuff to other people is sometimes quite hard, because we know that, we don't want to talk about ourselves and big ourselves up too much, I guess. But a lot of other people do actually find what we do is fascinating. They've got a great interest in it. And that's the thing that I've learned over the last couple of years, is that talking about ourselves and shouting about our achievements is actually more of a good thing than keeping it to ourselves and just kind of, instead of just sharing it with everyone else as well.
Right. There's a difference between being confident and being cocky. And,
yeah.
And it's probably, those two words, I think when I hear them, they sound so different, but I think in reality, it's probably that gap is probably a lot closer than maybe I had imagined at one point. Like the root of it all is you're boosting yourself up essentially when you're being confident and cocky. Perhaps it's just the manner that people go about it that separates the two. Like you said, confident is more of maybe a humble, maybe a more positive approach, whereas cocky is maybe more of like a negative or condescending approach. I'm not sure. It's such a fine line, but it's such a...
Yeah, I guess shouting about your own achievements is more talking about yourself, but then being cocky is potentially talking about yourself in respect to others. And
right.
Yeah, I guess is saying that you've done well, you've won this medal, and that sort of thing is good. But then saying that, I don't know, you're potentially better than everyone else, or these other people are beneath you, and that's obviously a bit more of the cocky side, isn't it? So saying that, you're too good for other people, but then it's just saying what you've achieved is more. You're telling facts rather than stating opinions at the end of the day.
I love that a lot, actually. Like the facts versus opinions piece. Confidence is speaking in facts. Cocky is speaking in opinions. And even to take it one step further, or another light on it, what kind of came to my mind as well is confidence is like speaking in absolute terms. Like I am blank, I am the blank, whatever it is. Whereas cocky is speaking like in relative terms, like I'm better than you. Instead of this, it's like I'm better than you added, like the absolute versus relative, facts versus opinions. I think a lot of people could get potentially confused, and it does seem like quite a small gap. But like you said, when you go through a process like fundraising, you learn that confidence is the key. Obviously, I mean, I don't know why I just said that. It's so obvious confidence is better than cocky. But I think I say that, I guess, because I think for a lot of people, it's hard for them to be confident without being cocky. But I think the way you put it there was really helpful. Speaking about it in fact.
Yeah. I guess it just all comes with practice, doesn't it? And and that's like most things. It's getting used to it and learning. Well, I've probably been cocky quite a few times in my career, but it's just about learning when you are, and then having the awareness to know how to react in certain situations. And most of the time, well, I tell myself and I tell my guys is that. Stay out of the argument, stay out of posting your opinions everywhere. Just let your results do the talking at the end of the day, and just leave it at that.
Exactly. And the practice piece, I just want to touch on that for a minute. With anything in life, practice is key. Even though somebody could sit there and think, how am I going to practice being confident? My answer to them would just be like, just do some positive self-talk, like speak to yourself in a confident manner. That's, I think, a great place to start to practice being confident, and catch yourself when you start to maybe think about something cocky. Catch yourself and divert from it and go back to the confidence piece. Speak in those facts to yourself. Don't speak about those opinions to yourself.
Yeah. I guess, well, for me, confidence comes from, well, what sort of goals you're setting yourself. So if you're setting yourself a performance goal, so say that you want to come first, second, third, or whatever, something like that, then, and you're not achieving that, obviously your confidence is going to be low. But then it's just about focusing on what on a sort of process that you're working towards, and no matter how big or how small, he's like, and then you build that up. So confidence is always key, but it's just how what you're focusing on can have a massive impact on that. So I know for myself, is thinking about results is not necessarily the main thing for me. It's about the process, about how I'm feeling, like how my body's feeling, and how I'm reacting to injuries, and how training is going in general. And if all that is going well, I know the performance will be good at the end of it. But you've got to have that base level of confidence in your sort of everyday life. And if you don't have that, then the performance is always going to suffer.
For you and your goals, what is your sort of like tracking system or cue? Like, how do you know whether you're hitting your goals or not?
For me, it's obviously it comes down to different sections. So obviously I'm a pilot of the bobsleigh, so I can't do any of that during the summer. So it's kind of like that's unknown until you get back into a sled. But for me, pushing wise, I know my body pretty well, and I know, well, the last few years, like I said, I've been injured a lot of the time. So I've even put in some really good performances over the last couple of years, even though my body has just been a wreck. So I know that even in the worst case scenario, things are going to be all right. So, but I'm just trying to get some consistency in my training and just feeling good most of the time. And I know my body well enough that if it's feeling a certain way, I'm going to put down some decent performances. And that's just something that comes with a lot of practice and a lot of experience.
I think that's an amazing place for people to start, like tracking their goals or whatever, is start about how do you feel about it? Like, if you feel good, if you feel right, like your body is the best cue, I think. Like, your body knows you best.
Yeah.
If you feel good and you feel energetic, you feel ready, you feel like you've accomplished something, you've probably accomplished your goals. And on the flip side, if your body is sore, it's aching, it's telling you like this is not good, perhaps your goals are a bit misguided in how you set them up or how you look at them.
Yeah, it's all about just having a good plan. If you haven't got a plan, then you're completely lost, because you don't know what you've done or where you're going or anything. You can't track anything. So if you have a plan of like what you're going to do week by week and month by month or something like that, then you can evaluate what's happened. How do you feel? How are you reacting to this, that, and the other? And it's about not looking left and right about what everyone else is doing. It's how everything's affecting you. Don't think like, oh, this guy's doing this much on his squats and he's doing this many times a week. It's like, that might not work for you. If your body's not reacting well to it, then why keep doing it? It's like you need to know what you're doing, track it, and evaluate it all the time. And what's right for someone else might not be right for you. And it's about finding what fits you.
Beautiful point there. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Point.
Well, for me, like a few years ago, like my whole career, I've had a bad back since I was about 16, and I've been trying to do like traditional lifts, like clean squats, deadlifts, like the normal sort of exercises like that. And everyone's on about, you need a big squat, you need a big clean. But then I think about 5 years ago, I just said, this is not helping me. Like, I'm continuing to do these exercises and I'm working on them for a few weeks, and then my back flares up, and then I can't do anything for a month or two. So I need to try and find something else. So I started doing a lot of single leg exercises, and I just ditched all the double leg stuff. And that's something that I could consistently do. And as soon as I'd done that, my performance just skyrocketed, because I was doing something consistently. My body felt good, and I wasn't fighting against this, that, and the other anymore. And that worked for me. And it just kind of proved that just because everyone else thinks you need to do something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should.
Exactly. There's a million ways to skin a cat. And I went through a similar revelation, I guess, where I was like I did powerlifting for a bit. And I was traditionally that kind of squat, bench, deadlift guy with the barbells, the heavy weights. And it was a couple of injuries. At one point I partially tore my pec. Another point, I really messed up my back deadlifting, and just made me think about, so I guess I take a step back. Growing up, I really watched like Mr. Olympian, those bodybuilding things, I guess. And there's always a debate of like, what's the best training split? Full body 3 times a week, one body part a day, push pull legs, whatever it is. And at the end of the day, it's like every person that's won Mr. Olympia and has looked like as big as they are have used different training splits. It's not about which one is better than the other. It's just about picking one and doing it. And so like yourself, I transitioned to more single leg exercises, and that really just helped with my back, but it was still a bit sore. But the one thing in COVID, I mean, one of the silver lines for me for COVID that has helped is I've just really been experimenting with kettlebells. And I've been able to order a couple kettlebells to my house and just doing kettlebell exercises like cleans with the kettlebell, squats with the kettlebell, single leg exercises, kettlebell swings, whatever it is. And I just feel better doing kettlebell exercises compared to barbell exercises, which doesn't mean kettlebells are better than barbells. It just means that for me personally and my goals, kettlebells, is best for me. Going back to the point that you said, it works differently for everybody. Like one thing might work well for you, doesn't work well for me, and vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you're making progress and you've got a plan and you can track that. And if it's actually working, then that's great. And sometimes coming away from an exercise for a little while, especially the barbell exercises, because they can be quite rigid ways of moving. And obviously if you're running or something like that, you've got such a much bigger range of movement. Like you do everything on one leg. So when you're doing these sorts of sports, so why are you training in the gym with two legs or something like that? It's just a quite restricted way of thinking. So it's, as long as it's helping and you're finding the improvements, then why not? There's no reason for not, just because everyone thinks that you should. And that's what you find in a lot of the scientific literature, is that things get rewritten all the time. And just because it's thought of at one stage doesn't mean it's going to change and it's going to stay the same in the future. Everything can always change.
It's the same thing for diet too. Like at one point, it's like fat is so bad, and then I think is it keto, where it's like just fats and protein and no carbs.
That's the one.
And then it's like, then you want to go like for the healthy split. It's just like there's so many different ways, and it's the same thing. It's just like we're all humans, but within that group of humans, we're all built a little bit differently. Some chromosomes, some genetic is a bit different, where certain exercises, certain meals, certain systems work best for some and they don't work best for others. It's just about finding what works for you at the end of the day.
Yeah, sometimes it's not just about physiological and how your body reacts. Sometimes it's about the mental side of things, and sometimes you just have a mental block to some exercises, or you just can't follow a certain diet because your brain just doesn't think that that's appetizing and doesn't work that way, or something like that. So it's just about balancing what works for your body, but then also works for your mind as well, because that's also very important. If you can't convince yourself that it's worthwhile and sticking to, then you're never going to achieve anything.
Exactly. And before we move on to the last question I had, the one thing I wanted to bring up, because you mentioned lower back pain, and I don't know if it's still something you struggle with to a degree, but it's still something that I kind of struggle with to a degree. And I'm sure many people that listen to this have at one point or another struggle with lower back pain. There's a video on YouTube. I'm not sure if you've ever come across this before.
Okay.
But it's called the 12-minute foundational training. It's basically 12 minutes of lower back exercises and like hips and hamstrings. It's kind of like yoga, but it's really, really tough. And during it, like your lower back is on fire. But just the amount of relief that I've had personally from like a sore lower back or sore glutes, whatever it is, I can't even like put into words just how much of a helpful resource that exercise is. So for anybody that's listening that has lower back pain, I'd recommend starting off with, it's called 12-minute foundational training. It's a guy with like glasses and two guys on the side of him demonstrating the exercise. It's hard to miss. But yeah, just a little nugget I had to throw in there.
I'll give that a check out.
Yeah. The last question that I had was, you had mentioned before The Inner Game of Tennis as kind of a book that's helped shape your mentality. And I'm curious if there are any other books, podcasts, perhaps mentors, coaches, teammates, whoever it is that you feel have been really instrumental in you developing the sort of mindset that you're living out day to day.
Yeah, so one was quite early on. This is back when I was doing athletics. I was doing decathlon, and he was my discus coach back in Horsham. And so as a combined eventer, would sometimes jump around different coaches that was specialized in each of the individual events. And I remember when my first few sessions with him, probably longer than that, for the first few months, he used to do my head in, because I'll do a throw and then I'd ask him, how was it? Then he'd ask me a question and I'd be like, you're the coach, you're supposed to tell me. It's like, why are you asking me? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And over time, I started to understand that he's trying to get me to understand what I'm doing and start to self-evaluate myself. by each throw and kind of understanding when this happens, this is what I've done, instead of him just telling me what's happening all the time, and I learn nothing, because then I become dependent on the coach. And it was him just trying to teach me how to teach myself. And that's what I've learned quite a lot, is that you can't rely. A coach is just a tool. Is there to be used when you need it. And at the end of the day, it's the athlete that has to do the performance. So the coach can't hold your hand and then help you do it. They're just there to get the best out of you. And if you ask them a question for something, but then you need to learn from that. It's not just about always relying on a coach. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've taken away, is to be self-sufficient and try and learn as much from your coaches instead of just using them just to tell you feedback points.
Exactly. And that's the exact same thing that I tell the kids that I coach is, I'm here just as a guide, as a tool, as a resource for you. I can give you the tools to make the changes, but I can't make the changes for you. I can't use the tools for you. That motivation has to come from within, and that desire to get better, and that desire or that initiative to use the tools yourself. Like you said, I can't be the crutch that you kind of lean on. I'm just there as the person to guide you where to go. Yeah,
exactly. So if I'm doing some coaching, as soon as they finished, I'd be like, how was that? What did you feel? What was different? And then they can kind of tell me. And if it was right, I would say, yeah, that's right. You kind of get an understanding. And if they get it wrong, then it's kind of say, no, this is what you actually did. And then they can kind of like pinpoint what that feeling was when they do that certain mistake. So then they can notice it without anyone telling them. And they'd be like, oh, that's happened again. And they know exactly what's happened.
And then I was going to say, sorry, that feedback piece, at least in my experience, I have the mindset that if there's too many coaching sessions in a row where the message I want to get across isn't being received, perhaps then that's a cue to me to then change my coaching style and coach and change how I coach potentially, or change how I deliver the message. Because it's not only, when I look at an ideal coach-athlete relationship, it's not just about the coach making the athlete better, it's about the athlete making the coach better, making that kind of dual relationship, a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah, definitely. It works both ways. If a coach only has one sort of style and is coaching so many athletes in exactly the same way, he's going to get different results for every single one, because everyone's going to interpret their words or what they're doing differently. So they've got to find a way of getting the same message to them in a way that they can understand it. It's like speaking a different language with everyone. It's like speaking German to one person, English to another, and Japanese to another. It's all, everyone understands things differently. And if you just say like feedback, it's like, get your knee higher, someone might do something completely different to achieve the same thing. And then you've kind of got to work it out and then say, and then when you get to a certain cue or feedback for that person, you have to remember it and tell them, this is the cue that kind of gives this certain response, and learn from that.
I love it, man. Listen, Brad, this has been a lot of fun. I think not only valuable for anybody that's been listening, but valuable for me as well. I've learned a lot personally as well, and that's how I know it's been a successful podcast episode. So I truly do appreciate your time. Hope you're enjoying the nice German weather. And
yeah, thanks a lot. Well, even myself, I learn a lot from these sort of things as well. It's like a lot of things that kind of just stick inside my head, which until you actually speak about, you don't know that you actually knew. And this is actually what goes on in the back of your head without you even realizing, that sort of thing as well. So exactly. Speaking about these things, it also helps me learn about it as well.
Awesome. Again, Brad, appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll do this again sometime in the future.
Yeah, sounds good.